This is the Teacher Talking Time podcast.
I was just thinking, a lot of teachers would probably say, but Leo, Lara, there is output in a PPP lesson because we present the language.
Mm-hmm.
Teachers present language in many different ways. They're very creative with the presentation part. I've seen all kinds of very creative lessons where teachers would bring a can of soup to introduce the modal verb can, because it's all about eliciting.
Cool.
They would have very good practice where they would drill, they would do all kinds of things, and then they would have that output part. They would have that. So why, I think the question that I think a teacher, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of this kind of teacher who would be like, TBLT still doesn't work. There is output in that lesson framework, but is it the same kind of interaction in that sense? And I don't know if it is, Lara, because I feel in a way that you've been trying to prime students to use that very specific structure. And I think all of us have experienced lessons where we taught a very specific grammatical structure. We practiced that very specific grammatical structure. And when it came to the production, the output, they used other structures to still negotiate meaning, to still interact with each other. How is that different from the kind of output that we have in task-based language teaching?
Yeah, so all of the things I was just talking about, interaction, input, output, negotiation for meaning, feedback, those could be a part of another type of teaching approach, for sure. It could be part of a PPP environment. It could be a part of, other kind of approaches that are on the same kind of level of TBLT, like project-based learning or CLIL, content and language integrated instruction. So of course that the interaction could be very facilitative in all of those approaches and cases. Where TBLT is different is in the design, in the structuring of lessons, in the approach to the curriculum and the syllabus design, ideally, and then in when the focus and form happens. So you could have a highly interactive lesson that has access to all the features, but it could be focused on explicit drilling of information. You could say, go to your classmate and ask, or go to every classmate and ask them, what's their favorite color, or what color do you like, or something like that. And maybe this is Spanish class and you want them to like practice the Gustar way of formulating to like. And so really it's interactive. Maybe they're going to have some negotiation for meaning. Maybe they had a communication breakdown. It could have all of the things, but they're just drilling the form. Right. So they're just going to be focused on explicitly trying to replicate what their teacher said that they wanted. So the question is whether that's actually going to lead them to a place where they're able to integrate and utilize it, or if they were just able to do it because they were drilling it in the moment in the classroom. Yeah. So whereas a TBLT strategy would be completely different, right? It would be activating prior knowledge, creating a situation perhaps where maybe Gustar is likely to be used, but it's more about maybe finding roommates that like the same things that you like to get the best group house in college or something. Yes. And so maybe Gustar is going to come up and maybe the teacher will hear some issues with it and will go around and give corrective feedback in the moment, or maybe we'll do a mini lesson on it as a result. But they're going to really want to find the roommate. They're focused on a different outcome now, not just practicing Gustar. So this idea of the communicative outcome being the driver is really where the acquisition comes in, rather than like, okay, great, we all practice Gustar. Nice job, and go out in the world and use it.
For real though, living by yourself now is almost impossible. You need a roommate. You need a roommate.
Especially in expensive cities like we all live in. Oh my gosh.
So it's find the richest roommate then.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Somebody whose parents already bought them a really
hopefully
nice
has
apartment.
good tasting colors.
That I know Leo wants to talk about advice for teachers who want to try it out for the first time TBLT, which maybe I think we've mentioned it, but just in plain terms, this is my question really. What is a task?
Oh, well, I will acknowledge that there are multiple definitions of what a task is. So and different like theoretical claims of what they could be. So for my researcher friends out there, please don't, take me down for my perspective. But
You
I
won't
think,
share the podcast
Oh,
with them,
God.
don't worry.
yeah, keep
No.
them
God,
away.
we
No.
don't. Yeah, we don't. Yeah,
So
we don't
I
need
think,
that here.
so long might say that a task could be anything that somebody would do in their day-to-day life that they need language to do. So it could be as broad as that. So an activity that you actually need to do in real life. Typically, teachers, I think, like to hear that broken down a little bit more. And Ian and Ellis and Tani have kind of created this framework that I think has become really popular for kind of breaking down what components could a task include. And usually that meaning is the primary driver of the interaction. So again, they're not focusing just on using language. They're actually trying to do something with it. Usually that there's some
Right.
sort of communicative problem that you're trying to solve. So that creates that gap where you need to
Right.
communicate and share. That there's usually some relationship with the real world. And so you aren't like focused on just using specific structures. So this would mean like you probably wouldn't want to give learners like a word bank that they have to use, because that would be a way to turn it into more of a drill. So there's some relationship with real world, and usually, yeah, there's a communicative outcome. So the outcome is not simply practicing language. It's that we found the perfect roommate.
Right.
In the example that I previously gave. So you should primary focus on meaning, this communicative outcome, the need to solve a problem and communicate and bridge a gap, and then some relationship with real world activities where learners are relying on their own language skills to solve these problems. Those are usually how people tend to define tasks. So that was a very long answer,
Nice.
but I think it
No.
covers all of the ways that people might hear about tasks.
Yeah.
And if we take that roommate example, I think teachers also like to hear examples of examples, right? If I
Yeah.
wanted to use that, and I think, especially with student demographics, getting a roommate is a pretty practical one for sure for a lot
Yeah.
of people. What are different ways that as a teacher we could frame that? We talked about the outcome of finding a roommate, but how would what's the task instruction? Because task instruction is also important, I think, as well. What are different ways of framing the instruction for that task?
Yeah, well, a really common one that I think people have found is a useful framework is using a pre, during, post task kind of strategy, where you have activation of prior knowledge or sort of an introduction to the topic. So like maybe you're going to watch a video of people struggling to find roommates, or having some sort of like get to know you interactions, or you're going to talk generally about what kinds of things that you look for in someone that you live with, or some sort of
Right.
And the pre-task can sometimes be like multiple class periods, like building up to this. It's not just like always just like a 5-minute quick warm up. It could be a whole kind of separate time.
Could be an
in
entire
itself.
lesson.
It could be an entire lesson. It could be multiple lessons potentially.
Which is also another thing about TBLT, Lara, just to interrupt you very quickly.
Yeah, of
And I
course.
think it's important for teachers to know this. You cannot, I think a lot of teachers are under the assumption that you just run a TBLT lesson in 45 minutes to an hour.
Oh, no. Yeah. I mean, it's flexible. If that's all you got, then sure, we could design a way for you to fit it in that way. But usually it's the gradual buildup to the target task, right? So we maybe are having some smaller mini tasks on our way, or we're having a pre-task activation of prior knowledge, kind of a warm up or a series of warm ups.
Right.
And then we usually move on to the main task, or get closer and closer to that target task. So in this case, I could imagine a task could be, it would depend on the level, of course, but you get everyone's got a profile or a couple profiles, and you have to ask people like who their friends are, and they have to tell you about them. And then you have to say like, oh, well, this is what I'm looking for.